Hey, YouTube family, welcome to another video of The Kevin Strong Show. And in this video, the title of it is, Was Quitting My Job a Mistake? A lot of you have been seeing things in the news, people talking about this great resignation. People were quitting their jobs without having something lined up. The labor market was very favorable in terms of the employers were basically begging for workers to come to work for them. They were offering signing bonuses, higher pay, uh, wage increases. But at the end of the day, we all know that wages within the last 24 months, if you don't go back even further, wages are just simply not keeping up with inflation. So in this video, we're going to talk a little bit about if you quit your job within the last, let's say, year, or even since the healthcare crisis came about in March of 2020, was it a mistake? And I think only you can come to that conclusion. But I'm going to talk about an article that shed some light on this, and then I'll give you my little editorial piece as we go along the way. But first, I'm going to ask you to humbly subscribe to my channel, comment, and share because you know I care. So this article starts off by saying, hey, look, as recently as March, there were a record 2 jobs for every American seeking one. Some 4.5 million workers quit that month, and layoffs were at the lowest level since the government began keeping records. So that set the stage for people to say, to kind of self-reflect too during the part of the health crisis where we basically couldn't go anywhere. People began to, in my humble opinion, self-reflect, look at their lives, look at their jobs. A lot of people came to the conclusion that they were not happy with their chosen profession or job. They wanted something new. They wanted to work remotely. Remote work allowed people to get a taste of freedom, a quasi self-employment feeling, if you will, but you still have the attachment of a guaranteed income. And a lot of people simply did not and do not want to give that quote unquote freedom up. And it was an interesting time in our history because I think as we reflect back on it, we're going to say, that is when a lot of people woke up and basically figured out that they're basically in that proverbial rat race, the debt treadmill, and they need to do something exciting in their lives, but more importantly, do something that they enjoy. So I'm going to go ahead and continue with this article a little bit. It says, even after adding an expectation, a busting 528,000 jobs in July of this year, the labor market is showing signs of returning to pre-pandemic conditions as the Federal Reserve barrels ahead with its efforts to show the economy, with its efforts to slow the economy and kill inflation. More workers are filling out jobless insurance claims. Fewer of them are quitting, and more employers are curbing higher. So now we're starting to see the pendulum shift back to being advantageous to the employer and no longer the employee. A lot of you guys who follow me on Facebook know I've been saying this for the longest. You know, you have to kind of take some inventory of yourself in terms of what are my strengths and what are my weaknesses. And you can't just go out there and just say, hey, you know what, I want to be self-employed. It takes a lot to do that. And even if you have all the skill sets and the marketing and the research and the infrastructure around something like that, you know as well as I do, around 90 to 95% of small businesses fail within the first 5 years. And sometimes that's a lack of capital, sometimes it's a lack of marketing, and sometimes it's just a numbers game where you have to start multiple businesses, learn from trial and error, only to find out what really works for you and what you have a passion for. So I think that's incumbent. I think a lot of people preemptively jumped the ship, so to speak, maybe thought the grass was greener. I've also talked about that. If you've done that, especially if you're in a situation where you've built up some seniority or you're somewhat insulated from an economic downturn, then you're less likely to be laid off because you've been there for a while. So it doesn't really serve you if you get a $2 or $3 an hour raise or a $5,000 signing bonus, only to find out 6 months after you come on board that you are what? First in, first out, because you are the new kid on the block. Another very scary situation when you're in transition like that from one job to the next is that if you haven't worked enough hours to qualify for unemployment insurance. So when you voluntarily quit the job that you had and you haven't worked enough hours for your new job, you don't qualify for unemployment insurance. So you get nothing when they lay you off. Hopefully, you've got some reserves lined up to help you transition to find another job. But let me go ahead and dive back into this article a little bit. It says worker advocates have hope that the labor market was undergoing a long-term transformation, yet it's becoming clear that the shift that took place during the pandemic was temporary. And that's exactly what I was talking about. People thought that they're going to work remotely for the rest of their lives. Oh, I'll just be able to quit and do any job that I want to. That necessarily is not the case. Those people probably quit their job too soon. The article goes on and says, already employers are posting fewer jobs, rescinding job offers, and hiring workers at a slower pace, as well as giving their existing workforce fewer hours. And then the article goes on to say that the average work week went from 34.6 hours in July down from 34.8 hours a year ago. So basically what you're seeing is the government, I think, is kind of playing the shell game, so to speak, with some of these employment and job numbers. A lot of these jobs that are being created or added are part-time jobs. So when you get a part-time job, that actually counts as you being employed. So what I'm seeing in the research that I'm doing is that what you're having is that there's not a lot of full-time jobs that allow you to sustain a good quality of life with benefits and be able to have a decent lifestyle. So what some of the people are doing, or some of the average Americans are having to deal with, is that they are working multiple part-time jobs to fight inflation, lack of benefits, or lack of pay. And those numbers are getting added up. And then on the surface, it looks like we're adding all of these hundreds of thousands of jobs. But when you really look underneath the hood, how many of those jobs that were added are really, really quality jobs? I think it's few and far between. One of the biggest retailers in the world, Amazon, became the latest giant this month to reveal just how much it has wound down its workforce, announcing that it has been hiring at its slowest rate since 2019. Folks, that's before the healthcare crisis, and has some 100,000 fewer employees on its payroll just a quarter ago. So that's a massive slow up compared to all the blistering hiring that was going on the first quarter of 2022 and definitely all of last year. So here's a teachable story, and then I'll kind of wrap this up with one other point that I'd like to make. There's this one lady called Debbie, or her name is Debbie Ricks, was working at a Spin DC ping pong bar in the nation's capital when the pandemic hit and her employer was forced to lay off staff, right? Because of the healthcare crisis. With nowhere else hiring, she leaned on unemployment insurance along with income from a photography side hustle to pay her bills. Okay, you do what you have to do. But here's the interesting point. Now Ricks is ready to return to work. The 44-year-old has submitted, quote, at least a dozen applications to various restaurants and hotels, yet not a single employer has given her a job offer. Listen to what I just read to you, folks. Now she's ready to return back to work and do something full time. The time to get gainfully employed is right after your employer had laid you off because of the health crisis. You have to start looking then. But see, when you read between the line in this type of article, basically from this little snippet, what I'm reading, what happened to Debbie is Debbie got laid off, got a little complacent, got unemployment insurance, and did a little side hustle in photography, okay, to bridge that gap just enough to keep her head above water. And then she rode that complacency all the way out to the point where she couldn't do it anymore. And then when she got ready to come back to work, she expected the labor market to welcome her with open arms. And now she's saying she's a victim because she's applying to all of these places and no one's hiring. So if you're in the hotel and restaurant business, that's basically considered hospitality or low service type work. It's basically considered unskilled labor, generally speaking. So those are some of the people that are most vulnerable when you have an economic downturn. You can't afford to be complacent and say, you know what, I'm just going to kick back, chill for about 18 months. And then I'm going to decide when to go out there and get a job, as though, you know, you have this highly desirable skill where like you've got a 4-year degree or 6-year degree in computer engineering, and you can do coding and all those other things, with someone like Microsoft or Facebook or some tech giant can just pick you up and make multiple offers to compete for your skill set. That's not the case with this particular person, and I think that's happening a lot. Some people thought that over a period of time, when their method of living ran its course, then they would just automatically transition back into the workforce. It would not have a problem. And that's just definitely not the case. And it also could be a bigger issue talking about complacency and that type of mindset. Not all, but a lot of people in that industry have that complacency mindset, that job security is that next paycheck. And when you put yourself in a vulnerable position like that, you're at your beck and call of your employer. You're really not in control of anything. I'm going to wrap the video up with this last little point here. It says, at the same time, 303,000 more people were working part-time than in the previous month. A reliable sign that more people were having difficulty finding full-time work. And that's the whole point I've been saying. These job numbers have been cooked. They've been reshuffled to make you think that we've got this strong economy, and it's few and far between when you look at the average American that's looking for a sustainable, verifiable, quality income to the point when they say they can pay all their bills and have benefits. It's very difficult to do, especially in an inflationary environment that we're in now. And who knows when inflation is going to come down to anything remotely to a point where people feel they've got a little extra room after they pay their taxes. Once again, this was the Kevin Strong Show. I hope you enjoyed this content and this format. I kind of changed it up a little differently. Please take a moment to hit that like button, comment, and share, because I care. And I'll see you guys in the next video.